When you first installed Notebook software, you may have noticed this on the left or the right of the screen. These are the floating tools, and they enable you to use Notebook features outside of Notebook. So for the next couple of minutes, we're going to look at some of the features on the floating toolbar. First of all, let's look at how to manipulate the floating toolbar. You can move it by grabbing it here and moving it up and down the screen. To show the floating tool, simply click on the arrow. If you want it on the other side of the screen, click here and drag, and it will then clip to the opposite side of the screen. This way you can position it in the best possible place for your needs. You may not always want the floating toolbar visible. For instance, when you're using Notebook, it really probably just gets in the way. So to hide the floating toolbar, click on the system tray and the smartboard icon, and you can hide floating tools. Showing floating tools is easy, just reverse the process. This is the default floating toolbar. You can see that there are a number of pens, black and red, and also a highlighter. There's an eraser, there's a button for doing a right mouse click, there's a shortcut to launch Notebook, and there's a way of bringing up the floating keyboard. Of course, if you're using a smartboard, you'll find that many of these features are available on the hardware. For instance, if you want to write on the screen, you can simply pick up a pen, or you can pick the eraser up, or there's even a button to launch a floating keyboard. But that's the default tool set that you get with floating tools. This icon at the bottom opens the settings, and it's from here that you can actually start to customize the floating tools. Once you become a confident user of floating tools, you'll realise that customizing the toolbar adds lots of extra functionality. So let's look now at some icons you can add to do just that. To add a tool to the floating toolbar, simply click and drag it where you want it to go. For this example, I'm actually going to drag the screen shade on. This is a very useful feature to have when you're using any program on your computer, because now I can simply mask the entire screen by clicking the screen shade button. And of course, just like the screen shade in Notebook, I can drag to reveal. This is a very useful feature when teaching, where you don't necessarily want students to see all of the page you are showing. Another tool you may find useful is Spotlight. So let's drag that on and see what it does. For this example, I'm going to open an Excel spreadsheet, and as you can see, there's quite a lot going on. But if I want to focus the student's attention on a particular section of the screen, I can simply launch the Spotlight this way. Now at the moment, the Spotlight doesn't do exactly what I want it to do, because it really doesn't need to be a circular shape, but I can hit the drop down box and change that to a rectangle. Then I can grab the blue border to resize and start to look at the information that I need. I can also set the transparency so more of the background comes in. So with 50% transparency, you see that this is a really neat way of showing students particular sections of the spreadsheet without them getting overloaded with information. So the Spotlight tool is great in any application, really useful to add to your floating toolbar. The final tool I'm going to add to my floating toolbar is the area capture one. Drag that across. This is really useful because if I'm working on documents and I need to capture a fragment into Notebook, that's really easy. So for instance here, I want to capture just this fugue subject. I can click and drag over, release, and it's put straight into Notebook for me. So having area capture on your floating toolbar is really handy. Of course, there are other tools that I've not had time to cover, so you may want to experiment and find the tools that you use most often and then add them into the floating toolbar. If you find you use a lot of tools, you can actually double the column size and have 2 columns within floating tools. And remember that once you have customized the floating toolbar, next time you log onto your computer, Notebook and floating tools will have remembered your settings, so you'll only have to go through the customization process once.